Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Zaleski Sports Show. I'm your host, Jason Zaleski. We got a lot to unpack today. We'll get you updated on NFL happenings from this past weekend. Talk about high school football. High school football's back, baby, and we were there all weekend long. Fun time when high school football and high school sports are back in session. And should time allow, we'll ever so briefly touch on the Milwaukee Brewers and whatever is left of that season. But for now, we will start with the NFL. Steve Maves and our Green Bay Packers update will be along shortly. We will start, though, with news out of the NFL just about, less than 48 hours ago, 2 calendar days ago on Saturday. News came out of Indianapolis that Andrew Luck, quarterback, Stanford quarterback, Indianapolis Colts quarterback, oft-injured NFL quarterback Andrew Luck has decided that he's done playing football. And we talked about that last week on the show. Some of you may have missed it because it happened a little bit subtly. We were talking about our fantasy football advice is the best word we could put on it. It certainly was not anything guaranteed about fantasy football, but the advice we were giving, and we talked about steering clear of Luck. He was injured again, and maybe just steer clear of him altogether because we didn't know what was going to happen. There was just something weird going on that NFL fans and people in this broadcast booth thought about, knew about, we've been around this information before. We've been able to kind of collect it in, and something just felt weird about the whole thing. And then it turns out Saturday, Adam Schefty broke the news during the Colts preseason game, which was interesting timing, but the information became available. We understand that. When the information becomes available to you, you got to make a choice then. When do I go with it? Do I go with it now? We don't know all of Schefty's timing, but that's not what we're not here to talk about that anyway. We're just here to if you haven't heard, Andrew Luck has hung up the cleats forever, apparently, and has retired from the NFL. And during that situation, the Colts were headed off to the locker room at halftime, and the Colts fans were booing their now former quarterback Andrew Luck, and Steve Maves, shaking his head in disgust, and a lot did. And I'm not going to say what they did was anything but wrong. It certainly was. I think, though, so there was a lot of reaction about the fans booing, and man, how could they do that? This guy poured his life and soul. Obviously put his body in harm's way. He was injured a lot. He was injured every now and then at Stanford too, but his NFL career was really an injury-riddled career more than any other statistics or any other touchdowns or plays he had on the field. I think what the Colts fans perhaps, I'm going to attempt to apologize for them a little bit, were mainly upset about was that you're retiring now 10, 14 days before the season starts. Why couldn't you just told us back in May? Why couldn't you told us in June, July, anytime? I think that's mainly what they were upset about, but only they can speak for themselves. Certainly, though, booing somebody for retiring, poor sportsmanship no matter what. But maybe that's kind of what they were getting at. So, with that being said, we'll now head into Scoreland. And we'll start with a game that happened up in Canada, of all places, on a oddly shaped football field. And that was the Oakland Raiders and the Green Bay Packers going at it. Steve Maves, tell us all about the Packers game on Thursday.
Yeah, it was a disaster from the beginning. I mean, they got there, they were running through their warm-ups. The end zones were all torn up. They weren't to the NFL standards, obviously. Aaron Rodgers was going to play. To give the Canada fans something to watch and to enjoy, but you don't want to risk anything like Aaron getting hurt or one of your top players getting hurt. A couple Packers did get injured during the game. Rashad Gary got hurt twice. He walked off the field, got hurt once, and then got hurt again. And so hopefully Rashad's going to be all right. The big loss for the Packers is Equanimeous St. Brown. Aaron Rodgers was very high on Equanimeous during the his off-season workouts. Out 4 to 6 weeks is a huge loss in the wide receiver position for the Packers. That just leaves some space for a player like Jake Kummerow, Darren Lazard, just a couple of guys that are making very good strides to make this team this fall. Again, just a couple weeks until the season starts. One more preseason game coming up against the Chiefs at the end of this week. But Tim Boyle doing very well again in his time. He got the start on against the Raiders instead of Kaiser, Deshaun Kaiser. And so, again, he's making a push for himself to make the team, maybe push Kaiser to that number 3 spot and put himself in that number 2 spot. But, a late field goal pushing the Raiders over the Packers 22-21, like you said, mentioned in Winnipeg. And Packers fans and Packers are probably going to be happy to be back home as they did practice yesterday in Green Bay. So happy to be back home. Probably won't end up being in Canada again for a very long time. They were there after they won the Super Bowl, I believe in the 97 preseason and then back in the 99 preseason. So, again, probably won't see them out of country unless it is overseas or in Mexico or something preseason-wise in the next couple of years. So.
And you mentioned it, there's one preseason game left, thank goodness. Get done with this nonsense that is the exhibition schedule in the NFL. We're better off without it, I think. And the longer I watch these games, the more I know that these teams, now, unless you're some of these bottom teams like the Raiders, or perhaps the Jaguars or the Dolphins or somebody like that, you really need those games. But those top third teams in the NFL, teams that are scheduled to be playoff caliber teams, they don't need this. This is not going to help them at all. All it's going to do is hinder their chances. The Houston Texans had a look at that when they lost their star running back Lamar Miller on a routine running play. I mean, he was hit right in the knee. I mean, he's going to be injured no matter what, if it's an exhibition game or a regular season game. But you just when it's a meaningless game and you lose your player, that's when people get most upset. And then the preseason week 3, which is it used to be valued as the thing most realistic or most comparable to a real NFL football game. It used to be considered that. I don't even consider it anymore, just because of players like Aaron Rodgers not playing or others not staying in the game very long. They used to, your starting unit, offense and defense, would play until the third quarter in this week 3. That doesn't even happen anymore. Back to that Texans game, Deshaun Watson played 2 series. I mentioned already, Rodgers didn't play at all. Last night, Steelers, Titans, Mariotto and Roethlisberger, they just played a couple series. I mean, these are still just practice games. Steelers had a safety in that game. Safeties are always fun to see. And no better team than to have it happen against than the Tennessee Titans. That's kind of fun when that happens. So, as Steve just said, everybody plays on Thursday this week. Get these games out of their system. And then cuts. And then we'll have a lot to talk about next week in the NFL as teams pare their rosters down to the mandatory 53. And there'll be some player movement, some surprises. There are always surprises. This guy being cut from the team here, this guy being traded there. And we'll have a lot to talk about next week in the NFL. Moving to high school football, and we had a very exciting weekend of high school football. It all started last Thursday. And we had 2 games in the area. One of them broadcast right here, and that was Wisconsin Rapids taking on Neenah. Neenah Rockets came in and took the Red Raiders' lunch money and went back to Neenah with it, 45-7. And it was over just about as quickly as it began. A couple of defensive scores for the Rockets, a couple of offensive scores, and before you knew it, the game had already got away from the Red Raiders. Their touchdown, Leo Brostowitz scored in the fourth quarter in mop-up duty, and that's how that one ended. Wisconsin Rapids will play at Kimberly on Friday. That game will be found on WFHR.com and ZaleskiSports.com. You can watch Wisconsin Rapids and the most boring team in Wisconsin high school football history, the Kimberly Papermakers. And Neillsville Granton beat Fall Creek 41-6. That all happened on Thursday. And then Friday, Friday really was kind of a day of blowouts on Friday, and you can have that sometimes in week one at high school football. We'll keep all the scores local. Dominican beat Assumption 48-19. A lot like their public school brethren, that game was kind of out of hand quickly over at South Wood County 2000 Field. Spencer Columbus beat by Stratford 41-0. That was a game that I happened to be at, and that was pure domination. We are very high on the Stratford Tigers here at Zaleski Sports. We think they've got a trip to Camp Randall in the future this year. Some other scores: Athens over Rib Lake Prentice 47-6. Pacelli over Owen Withy 42-22. As we look down the score list here, I know Edgar picked up the win on the road to start the year, 26-12 over Baldwin Woodville. It was Loyal taking one on the chin on the road at Ellsworth, 42-8. So the Greyhounds will need to get things pointed back the right direction after that. And let's see, to Abbotsford 21, Marathon nothing. So again, a lot of zeros, a lot of or small numbers anyway on some of these. And again, if I skip your team, it's not intentional. We're just going through some of the highlights here. But make sure to message the page if you've got any complaints about the scores that we're talking about here. We'll make sure to mention your team next week. And yeah, I think that's about all that I was going to mention. And Marshfield, Appleton West beat Marshfield 2019. Really, the note on that was Marshfield won all those games last year. All those type of games, 20-19, last second field goal, recover a fumble, or a fumble by the other team didn't impact it. Marshfield got away with a lot last year. They didn't get away with this one this year, 20-19. They fall at Appleton West. They open up their brand new stadium Friday, and kickoff is at 7:30. There's a soccer match prior to that, so head on down to the new football facility in Marshfield on Friday if you're looking for something really fun to do. It'll be a good time over there. Get there early. Be a lot of people there. Appleton North beat Stevens Point 28-7, and Amherst took it to the Anago Red Robins 42-6, and Pittsville fell to Auburndale. We'll bring Steve Maves back onto the show. Steve, that was a game you called on Friday, and it was another one of those blowouts, 38-0, if I have it right. Tell us what happened over there in Auburndale.
Yeah, it was domination from beginning to end for the Apaches. Brand new offense for Coach Jay Anderson and the Apaches. They marched right down the field on their opening drive, got stopped inside the 5-yard line on a 4th and goal. And on the opening play for the Pittsville Panthers, Eli Fox with a fumble at the 4-yard line, and the Apaches put it right in on the very next play. Didn't look back from there. Coach Anderson, like I mentioned, a new offense for the Apaches, but they looked like they were clicking on all cylinders. I mean, just a high-tempo, up-pace, no-huddle offense. Cooper Weinfurter was great at quarterback, and Kyle Peterson at running back, Hunter Wright, wide receiver. Just a lot of good weapons for the Apaches this year. Again, in that very tough Merriwood Conference with Stratford, as you mentioned, and the Edgar Wildcats. Just they're going to have to put everything together when they take on those teams. They play at Blair Taylor on Friday, and then right away, week 3, they host the Edgar Wildcats. So they have to put everything together against Blair Taylor and have a great week of practice going up against the Edgar Wildcats the week before, or the next week. And as usual, Edgar, a very tough team, as we have known for the last 20 some years, as Coach Sins has put together a dynasty over in Edgar. So it was all Auburndale. Came out in the second half and were able to put in some of their JV players, backup players, and a very good showing from those aforementioned kids as well. So very good performance by Auburndale. After they gave up a 24-3 lead last year to the Panthers, Pittsville scored 21 unanswered points in that fourth quarter, and came back and ended up winning in double overtime. So a little revenge for the Apaches this year.
Yeah, it certainly was, and like I said, another one of those blowouts as it turned out, 38-0 here. We'll go through some of the other scores. How about another 38-0 finish? Greenwood over Tomahawk, and interesting about Greenwood, they moved to 8-man football next year, but in 2019, regular football seems to be a Greenwood Indian thing. I mean, you take down the Hatchets 38-0. Maybe you rethink your 8-man decision there. Man, maybe it's too late to rethink that. But so far, though, Greenwood up to the task here in traditional style football here in 2019. Again, over Tomahawk 38-0. Medford beat Rice Lake 14-0. I mentioned there are a lot of zeros and a lot of small numbers on the board. Wausau East over Merrill 23-6.
Sorry to interrupt,
Go ahead.
That's a huge win for Wausau East, a team that has struggled the last maybe half decade, 5-6 years, and be able to come out your first week and get a big win against a Merrill team that has struggled at times, but a very good, bigger school for the Blue Jays as well. But for Wausau East to get a big win in week one, have their confidence, because they won one game last year, didn't win a game the year before, and so to have a week one win for the Wausau East Lumberjacks is a big step forward.
Indeed. Rhinelander over Prescott 21-0. Athens, the Blue Jays take it to the Redmen over Rib Lake Prentice 47-6. And again, you think of these week one scores. A different way to think of this is for some of these kids, the first time they've ever played competitive football in high school, and that obviously goes both ways. When you've got one on 47, the other team on 6, you think maybe coaching had something to do with that. So congratulations to the Blue Jays, 47-6. And I think we'll wrap up our scores there. Again, we'll go back to that Stratford score. Again, Stratford over Spencer Columbus, 41-0. You mentioned Auburndale-Pittsville week one last week had a particular outcome. Week one last year for Spencer Columbus, that was, I believe, a 21-7 win at home or something like that. And it was a game that Spencer Columbus owned the whole way through. Now, as the season turned out, those two met again for a chance to go to state up in Medford, and Stratford got the better of the Rockets that day on a cold day, one of the coldest days in Wisconsin high school football history, or at least that's what I'm going to announce on this show. Those older than me, maybe they know a different colder day, but man, it was cold that day. But that's the way these seasons happen sometimes. And again, we've got the Stratford Tigers on Camp Randall watch, and we'll have that. We'll update you on the teams we think are favorable for a trip to state as we go through our high school season. It'll be one of our special angles that we'll take at it. And of course, the Edgar Wildcats are going to be in that category as well. We'll keep an eye on Edgar. As I said, they did pick up the road win over at Baldwin Woodville, 26-12. And other teams in the area on state watch to be determined. But as of week one, those are the two we're going to put on our list right now. And I didn't mention, I guess we need to go back here and talk about Colby Hornet football as well. I inadvertently skipped Colby because for some reason it's not showing up on my score sheet here. But the Colby Hornets took down Osseo Fairchild earlier on Friday as well. And I think that pretty much covers everybody we planned on talking about. But it's an exciting year already, and high school football is back. And we're always excited here on the Zaleski Sports Show about high school football. Coming up this week, we've got a few of our featured games. Of course, we'll be there for the stadium opening in Marshfield. You can watch that game live on ZaleskiSports.com, and it will also be broadcast on WDLB. We will have Gene Delisio and Dale Yukaitis on the call on the live stream, so you can watch and listen to both if you're on the move in your car or whatever it is. 1450 WDLB will have the radio call for you. In Wisconsin Rapids, we will be live over in Kimberly, and you can listen to that game on 1320 AM WFHR. It'll also be available on WFHR.com and ZaleskiSports.com for you viewing and listening pleasure. Yours truly will be on the call for that one. And then our other game over on ZaleskiSports.com is Assumption at Oshkosh Lords over at Titan Stadium. So we're pretty excited to be back at Titan Stadium, one of the finest facilities in all of the state. And those are three of the games that we've got our eye on. And Steve, I know you're going to get familiar with Amherst football this year. What do we know about the Amherst Falcons so far in 2019?
Yeah, as you mentioned during the score rundown, a 42-6 win over the Antigo Red Robins. They had to move that game to Waupaca High School due to the fact that as Marshfield has a brand new stadium complex, the Falcons also have one, but have not yet gotten their turf. It's with all the rain that came through, a lot of clay underneath the top surface of dirt at Amherst, and so they're looking for Week 5 opening game, not until September 20th. But as Coach Lusick has always put together a fantastic team. I mean, his numbers are back up again. They lost a lot of seniors last year, but the big one that I've have seen, their line is not as big as they have been, but you can't always have the ginormous guys that the Tyler Biotishes and all those guys that come through year after year. But to be able to put up a 42-6 win over a team two divisions higher than you is a huge win. But they have lost 3 in a row to St. Mary's Springs, where they go to Fond du Lac on Friday. Springs lost on Friday. They lost to Lake Country Lutheran 21-14, a team that they beat pretty handily last year in the Level 4 game to go to state. And so this Amherst-St. Mary's Springs has turned into an annual rivalry. Two of the best teams in the state the last handful of years. Obviously, Amherst, 10 years now or something. Ever since I got out of high school, they've been pretty dominant. So,
the key to victory there.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's going to be a muscle match because, like you said, St. Mary's Springs had won 29 games in a row before their loss in Week 1 to Lake Country Lutheran. So they're going to look for a little revenge to get back on the winning side of things. Amherst, like I mentioned, had lost 3 games in a row to St. Mary's Springs. They got shut out in their 2 matchups last year. They didn't score 1 point against Springs in Week 2, and then they met again in the playoffs. So Coach Lusick and company have to get something figured out, obviously, but to be able to put up 42 points in Week 1 is a big win for the Falcons, and should be a fun game. A lot of hype around this game coming into this weekend. So.
Excellent. Steve, thanks for the update there. A lot of these games we're talking about, highlights from last week can be found over on the Zaleski Sports Network on Facebook. Just find your favorite Zaleski Sports channel, and chances are you're going to be able to watch any highlight that you're looking for, or just hit the search bar on Facebook and type in Zaleski Sports Football, and they'll all show up there for you. We've got a whole week of good sports coming this week. We're going to have volleyball, soccer, and more football, and that all starts Tuesday. You can watch Columbus Catholic volleyball. You watch Marshfield Senior High School volleyball, Wausau Newman, Hudson, Loyal. We're going to have Stratford. Have all kinds of volleyball action coming this week. Soccer, we're going to see Marshfield Senior High twice this week. We'll have one on Tuesday. We'll show you some highlights on Tuesday, and then we'll show those Tigers live on Thursday, and then live again on Friday with their special performance before the stadium opener on Friday. Again, the Marshfield Senior High soccer boys team, the Tigers, will play at 4:30, and then football scheduled for 7:30 that day. We'll have that all live. And then again, as I mentioned, Assumption Royal football live. Wisconsin Rapids Red Raiders live. And the Marshfield Tigers live highlights coming of all kinds of other things. Football Friday, Amherst, Edgar, Colby, Neelsville, Loyal, you name it, and it is only found in that quantity on Zaleski Sports. So make sure not to get that twisted. Another highlight that's out there, how about Division I football? The number 1 team in the state, Muskego, took down Marquette University. We'll save any comments as we're coming up to the end here. We want to make sure to leave time for the Brewers, even though the Brewers aren't really leaving any time in their season. But you can catch all those highlights, again, over on Facebook at Zaleski Sports. And you are listening to the Zaleski Sports Show, 1450 WDLB. Okay. All right, Steve, we will get into some baseball here. As high school football begins, and college football and just football in general begins to hit full stride, we begin to ramp down on baseball, and it looks like, as I've been saying now for a number of weeks, Milwaukee Brewer fans will also be able to bring their season in for a landing here sooner rather than later. The Brewers are 5-5 in their last 10. Their run differential still stays pathetic at -29, and they've just been a struggling group since before the All-Star break, really from the All-Star break and beyond. It's just a team that's not been able to find their footing, a team that just it doesn't have the pitching it needs, and when the pitching's good, the offense is even worse, and that continues to be the case now as we head into the final days of this Major League Baseball season. The Brewers are just 4 games above 500, far cry from the team that they were last year, even though most seasons you say, well, Milwaukee's above 500, that's a good year. Things have changed around here in the past 6-8 years in Milwaukee Brewer baseball, and 5 games above 500 is not a good year, especially when you're sitting there in third place behind the Cardinals, and a lot of Brewer fans can stomach being behind the Cardinals, although not well. Most Brewer fans cannot stomach to be behind the Cubs, and that's where the Brewers are in third place. They are 67-63. They are a full 5 games in the loss column behind the Cardinals. The Cubs, a couple games ahead of the Brewers. But again, those St. Louis Cardinals, they've won 4 in a row. They're 8-2 in their last 10. And the Cardinals look like the team to beat, unless Steve Mave's going to tell us otherwise.
Yeah, no, they, like you mentioned, 7 of their last 8, I think, 13 of their last 16. They have been the hottest team in the NL Central. It was a division for anybody to take a couple weeks ago. Right before the All-Star break, the Pirates and the Reds have fallen off. But for most of the year, it has been anybody's. I mean, the Reds had a chance. They were 5 games out at one time, but they are obviously falling out. So the Cardinals making their push 2 games ahead of the Cubs. The Brewers 2 games out of the wild card. Dodgers obviously running away with the best record in the NL. The Braves at 80-52, but the Brewers, like you had mentioned, the bats get hot, the pitching's bad. The pitching gets hot, the bats are bad. So they've just not been able to find their stride, and with a huge series coming up against the Cardinals starting tonight, it could be do or die right now for the Milwaukee Brewers. If they fall 2 out of 3 to the Cardinals, even if they take 2 out of 3, it's going to be a big hill to climb at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's do or die, as I mentioned on this very show just a couple weeks ago, and anybody that would listen to me during the summer, I thought the Brewers were a solid third-place team, and it's exactly where they sit right now. Again, they are in third place. They are 4.5 games out of first. Even in the wild card standings, they're a couple games behind. We can go through that here real quick. But as the wild card, and you get a wild card, you get 1 game. Now that sometimes can benefit that wild card team. I just need to beat that other team once. Well, right now the Nationals seem to have there'd be 2 wild cards. The Nationals seem to have 1 spot locked up pretty well. They're 4 games clear of those pesky, naughty Chicago Cubs. The Cubs kind of got that 2nd spot locked up right now too. The Phillies are a game behind in the loss column to the Cubs, and the Brewers, their only hope to extend their season into the postseason is, I think, at this point, to get that wild card. They're 2 games behind the Cubs right now in that particular race, but that means in the standings, they're going to have to reach out of 3rd place and achieve 2nd place. And if they do, well, then maybe we're talking here, and they will have that chance as they play the Cubs later on this week. I don't know if you just mentioned it, but they play the Cubs in a weekend series here Thursday or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So Brewer fans, do or die. Last hope is here. Not only starting tonight do you have games against the Cardinals, you got to win that series. You got to win 2 out of 3 against the Cardinals at home. All right. Now they're a hot team, as Steve just mentioned, maybe one of the hottest teams in all of Major League Baseball. They've got to win they got to win the series, and then they've probably got to go to Chicago, and they've at least got to win 2 out of 3, if not sweep the whole thing. So you can tell me if I'm wrong there, Steve, but I think that's the math, and I don't know any other math you could figure out on that.
Well, and that's what's going to be big, because the New York Mets, right they're tied with the Brewers record-wise in that wild card, and they host the Cubs starting tomorrow. So the Cubs have a 3-game series at the New York Mets, and then they host the Brewers after that. So it's also do or die for the Cubs, because the Mets, as a lot of people have known the last couple of years, they've just fallen off at the end of the year. They made some acquisitions during the trade deadline and really right back in the thick of things, only 2 games out of the wild card as well, right there with the Brewers. So they need a lot of help, the Brewers, but all they need to do is win. They can have all the help that they want, all the help that they need, but if you don't win, obviously it's a bad take going into the last couple of weeks of the year. So again, next week is September already, and so that's going to be a do or die month, obviously, for the Brewers. But this week, like you had mentioned, this week and this weekend are the biggest 2 series of the year for the Brewers.
No doubt about it. All right, well. Got into a lot more baseball than we thought. That's always good. Always good to talk a little bit more to you about things going on in the sports world in and around Wisconsin. So that'll do it for today. Hope you had fun listening. Certainly got through everything we had planned to. NFL, high school, got some baseball action. And again, we've got lots of sports coming this week. And you can find it all over at Zaleski Sports, ZaleskiSports.com, and on the Facebook network. Zaleski Sports is your place to be for all of your local high school, NFL, and beyond. Guys, that'll do it for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again next week. Go Sports!